Hi everyone, Trip Harrison here from Twyford Funeral Homes in Manteo, North Carolina and Elizabeth City, North Carolina, bringing you another video in our series, When Someone Dies. This series of videos deals with the logistical issues of the loss of a loved one, planning funerals, making arrangements, things like that. It's more of a practical guide for those who are facing this presently or expect to face it in the near future. And we cover these topics all on this channel, so be sure to like and subscribe if this is something you're facing, or share it with someone who might be going through this right now. I'm going to let you in on a little secret since we've had 20 or so videos so far. The only other major interest in my life, the only other career I've ever had, is I was a professional musician. I play the piano. Jazz is really my thing, but I play a lot of stuff, and I've been playing since I was 20 years old. And when I got into the funeral industry, I had to, cut back, obviously, and play only as time permitted. But it does help me address the issue of music in funerals. And so I'm very passionate about this and helping people think sometimes outside the box a little bit. When I first became a funeral director in 1984, funeral music was a lot different than it is today. Back then, a family would sit down with the funeral director and select a few quiet songs, maybe some hymns. And most of the songs were played when I started. They were just played that we had a lady who was the pastor's wife of a large church in the area, and she played the organ in a little hidden room off the side of the chapel that where she wouldn't be seen, but she would play this organ music and hymns and things like that. And once in a while back then, there would be a soloist or a small ensemble, a duet, something like that, might play a song or two in a funeral. But in large part, we depended upon this machine that we had, which was sort of like I guess you would call it like a DJ turntable, but it was sort of 8-track looking carts that had pre-recorded songs by a popular performer, and they were all slow hymns. So it was very stereotypical funeral songs, not very happy, but intended to be comforting. As with most things, the options available for families today are vastly greater. Today I'm going to discuss just a few of the options available for any type of memorialization service. Music isn't just for the traditional funeral. People that have celebrations of life, or private burials, or even a memorial service for cremation, music can play a part. So what to do about all this? Well, number one, consider the loved one's musical interest, the person who's passed away. Many people will tell you they like most all music. I get that. People will say, I'll ask, in fact, what sort of music do you like? And they'll say, oh, I like everything. And that's probably true, but it's a little bit of a stretch in my opinion. And most people do have a certain go-to music, a genre that they really like and that they prefer, and they play it in their car, on their phone, at parties and events, on their headset. That passion should be reflected in the music played at the memorialization service, the passion of the person who's passed away. We've had many funerals here where all the music was country music. We are in eastern North Carolina, and that's right in that belt of the U.S. where country music is the most popular. The second thing we should do is consider when the music should be played. This will depend on the type of event, of course, and as an example, let's use a traditional funeral service and talk about some ideas that we could use in that way, and then you can adapt this to whatever arrangements you're making. If there's a viewing or a visitation, we've discussed that in one of our videos, the music may be at a lower volume to create ambience, but not to interfere with conversation among loved ones. Remember, that's a time that people gather to share memories and to console each other and to tell happy stories about things that have happened involving that lost loved one, and we don't want the music to compete with that. But not having music at all makes the pauses in between those conversations sort of awkward. So I usually suggest instrumental music because it gives mood and atmosphere without the distraction of lyrics. So during those events where it's sort of a meet and greet type of thing, instrumental music I found is best. And there's instrumental music of all genres. We can find it for classical, for rock, for easy listening, for hymns, of course, and I think it works the best in that environment. In the case of funeral, memorial, or celebration of life services, these are our events where we have the official commemoration of their passing. Before the service, it's a good idea to have some music playing during the gradual assembly of people. No one wants to come into a room with complete silence, and people will often be chatting with each other and greeting guests and all that. So it's a good idea to have some music playing in the background. Now, like anything else, selecting the pre-funeral music is an entirely customizable thing. And the mood of that music might be partly defined by the circumstances considering the loved one's passing. If this was a sudden, unexpected, tragic death of a younger person, it's an especially difficult and emotionally upsetting thing. So even though the purpose of the event is to provide closure and begin the healing of those left behind, there's a certain shock and sense of unbelievability in their death, and the event becomes sort of surreal. So my suggestion is not to get too upbeat and lively during this pre-event music. The second is to consider the age of the loved one. For elderly and very elderly decedents, ambient music is usually chosen, a collection of hymns. That traditional music I mentioned in the beginning is often a good choice because it's very old school, so to speak, and it may be consoling and comforting to the guests who are in the peer group of the lost loved one. Most funeral homes have a pre-compiled set of common hymns and other soft, reverent music, and really good funeral homes can compile a list of favorites of the deceased, favorite hymns or other music, and the family can put it into a playlist, or have the funeral director put it in a playlist for before the service. This is one of the things I'm proud of at Twyford Funeral Homes, is that we are open to being creative, and we have people on our team that can put together some special requests and things that are not right out of the funeral playbook, but are more tailored to the requests of the family to honor their lost loved one. Now, during the service, much of the music in the service will depend upon the religious component of the arrangements. For example, church services sometimes will incorporate music that's used in church and will often employ the existing church musicians at the church where the deceased attended. In fact, some churches will often use music that's part of the funeral liturgy. Some churches, more liturgical churches, Catholic, Episcopal, the high churches, as some people refer to them, typically have music arranged already in programs for funeral masses or funeral services, and that may be what's appropriate depending on the individual family. But many churches are open to any selections of music that the family wants, and certainly most funeral homes will accommodate the requests the family has. I do want to make one sort of a comment here that will be a standalone that I want you to remember throughout this process. Before we go any farther, a legal disclosure needs to be made here and clarified. Federal copyright laws prohibit all copyrighted music played for a gathering without a license. And these licenses are issued through a couple of organizations, ASCAP and BMI, and there's another organization as well. And license is obtained by the place where the funeral is being held. So typically, the funeral home would have those licenses, and of course at Twyford Funeral Homes, we have those licenses. And that allows us to play copyrighted music for a group, because if you do that without that license, The funeral home can be subject to fines and even criminal prosecution in some cases. So the exceptions for this are songs that are not copyrighted, very old songs, most hymns, things like that. The copyright has long ago expired, and they are what we call public domain. Even though your funeral director should clarify all of this, if the firm you're using doesn't have these licenses, it's a good plan to know that, because it could affect how things work there during that service. So for funeral services that are pre-recorded and live streamed on Facebook, for example, like we do here at Twyford Funeral Home, if there's copyrighted music performed at the service, even under the license, Facebook, for example, will mute out that music, at least for the first week or two, until they're convinced that it's not going to be anything that's a profit-generating activity, and then it will be returned. So if you have your funeral live streamed and someone's watching it as it's happening, that music will be blocked out or muted during that term, and usually within a week or so, it's opened back up for the public to hear. So these are just little bits of information that are important to know, so you don't expect something. You don't expect to be surprised when these sort of things happen. So in some cases, families may want live music. Sometimes there are family members or friends who will be requested to perform live. Sometimes there'll be congregational singing, like a classic hymn in church. Other times the family will want favorites of the deceased or songs with special meaning to be played from a CD or downloaded music. These songs may be subject to the same muting process as live stream services. So just so you know that that's a possibility. A word of caution, listen to the lyrics of the songs you select for the service carefully. Even though it may be a familiar song, people listen more to the lyrics of a song during a funeral or memorial service than they do any other time. So I think it's important that you listen to the lyrics and be sure there's nothing in there that would be inappropriate for the service, considering everything that you know about what's happened. So keep the person and occasion in mind, and you'll create the perfect playlist. One bit of information: if a custom playlist is compiled or live musicians outside the family are used, it's customary to pay an honorarium to those performers or technicians. Ask your funeral director for a suggestion as to an amount, and most of the time the funeral home will take care of that honorarium and just add it to the invoice for your charges. So thanks for being with me today. There's so much more we could talk about, but in the interest of keeping these somewhat brief, I just went over the highlights. I'm Trip Harrison at Twyford Funeral Homes in Manteo, North Carolina, and in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. If this video was helpful, please press the like button and subscribe to our channel for more comments and for more content. I welcome your suggestions for topics related to the logistics of handling the death of a loved one. We appreciate you very much. From Twyford Funeral Homes, I'm Trip Harrison. We'll see you next time.